So, Rafael, what's the difference between blogging and podcasts? They seem to be like everywhere. Is there a distinction?
There's a pretty big distinction. And first of all, thank you so much, Umar, for having me on your show. I've heard some great things about you and I've seen your content, which is great. Anybody watching this should go and check him out. Short answer, yes, there's a big difference in the way that the content is consumed. In essence, you could say that they're both educational in nature, depending on what type of podcast and what type of blog you have. It's either educational or entertaining. They are both essentially the same thing, but again, the way in which people consume that content is very different, right? And so now in the era that we are now, all of the content is moving to a video format. So it's like social media, but also now with blogging or podcasting.
The No Limit Selling Podcast, where mindset meets sales and leadership. Hey everyone, I'm so excited to have Rafael Flores here today. He's an expert at podcasting. His organizations creates winning podcasts. And this is a fact that he was sharing with me before we went on the air. It's like there is one blog for every 8 human beings on the planet, and podcasts are more rare than you think, so they have more impact. Rafael, welcome to the program. And what's the number? How many uh, podcasts per human beings are there?
There's about one podcast to every 1,600 people. And most of the podcasts that you'll see either on the the Apple Store or on YouTube, most of them don't make it past the first episode, and even fewer of them make it past 100. So it's a very good time to get into something like that.
Brilliant. So today we're going to talk about the business side of podcasts.
Okay.
And I think there's like probably 3 categories of podcasts.
Mhm.
So there's like somebody starting out right out of the gates.
Yeah.
There's someone that is has a podcast that isn't performing well,
Mhm.
and somebody else who's got a podcast that's on fire.
Yeah.
So let's look at those 3. So if someone's thinking of starting a podcast, and if we're making this for business, so let's pick an industry. Let's say they are an accountant. They want to start a
Okay.
podcast to drive business. They're going to start out of the gate. What are some of the things they need to think about before they delve into it? Because what's super embarrassing is, hey, everybody, I'm starting a podcast. Then, 3 months later, episode 2 finally comes out and they kind of give up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, so first and foremost, it's like anything that you do in life. Okay? So everything that you want to be successful, you have to do it consistently and you have to put effort behind it. It's
Yes.
this is the same with anything, right? Whether you're dieting, going to the gym, anything like that. And so podcasting is very much the same way. So I would suggest to people that the first thing is that they need to ask themselves is, am I doing this because I want to get famous? Am I doing this because I just find it interesting? Or am I doing this because I genuinely want to turn this into a business? And that's the other part to this. Because the podcast itself, you have to run it like a business, which means
Mhm.
that you have to take it very seriously and you have to have a process by which you produce the content. Because if you think that it's just a matter of sitting down, finding a guest and talking, that's fine if you're starting out. But if you actually want this to be a revenue stream for your business or to be a vehicle for awareness, whether it is about your product, yourself, your personal brand, or your business, you have to take it seriously, right? It's the same as if you were writing a blog and I were to write 5 blog articles, but there's no strategy behind it. There's no
Mm.
internal linking. There's no funneling, right? Then your SEO is going to tank, or you're not going to have much traffic on your blogs, right? So it's very much the same way. So for somebody that's starting out, to answer your question directly, if I'm an accountant, the first thing I want to do is that I want to at least have an idea of what are my next 5 to 10 episodes going to look like, and is that content going to be A, trending, B, educational, and 3, is it going to be something that people actually want to consume that's providing value? And that goes kind of hand in hand with
All
the
right, so I'll pull
educational
back
part.
just a little bit. So I guess being an accountant, it would be okay. Who's my ideal client is always the thing. So let's say automotive dealers are my client,
Okay.
and then figuring out, okay, exactly what you said is focusing this content that adds value to that demographic. So
Hmm.
if you've got your first 5 episodes ready to at least the idea for it ready to
Mhm.
go, how do you select your first guest?
That's also a very good question. What here's one thing that I just want to note really quickly is it depends what the purpose of your podcast is. So if the purpose of your podcast is to be the podcast for your business, that's one thing. If the purpose of your podcast is to be a business in and of itself, that's another approach. Okay. So, to your point, let's say if I'm an accountant and I have this particular vertical for my business, then yes, my podcast will be focused on that particular vertical.
Mm.
So, if I already have my five guests, I already have my 5 episodes. The easiest thing to do is to go on LinkedIn and to find people in your industry that have a moderate following. You don't have to go after somebody who has 500,000, even though I would say try it. You never know, but go after somebody that has a moderate following that you see is active on social media and connect with them and send them out an invitation. There's many ways that you can prospect people, but that's the easiest one.
Brilliant. So one of the things that kind of just more at a gut level feels right is to say, okay, I'm going to do these are the 5 episodes. This one I'm going to launch with. But before you launch, maybe do 10 episodes that are never going to air and just let people know, hey, we may take some snippets, but I'm just starting out just to kind of get the feel for the mic and the technology
Mhm.
and like how do you go to an ad. So any thoughts on that? So you get a level of comfort when you actually go do it for real.
Um, I would say, so I would give a slightly different recommendation. What I would say is do 3 episodes. Don't air them. Don't air the first one. Air all 3 of them once you have them. But I would say air them anyway, because
Mm,
number one, you never know. Number two, it's going to give you data, and that's what you want, right? You want to have data in terms of like how did that episode perform? Because let's say you make an episode and it just turns out that it was great, it had a good flow, right? Or even if you bombed, it doesn't matter. You should still put it out there so that you're already starting to build some relationship with the algorithms, right? And the other thing I would say is, yeah, it's like have your first 3 episodes, put them out there. If they bomb, that's the whole point. But I would say don't just do one and then post it. Do 3 and then post all 3 of them. So if somebody does find your episode, they at least have a little bit more content that they can go to.
brilliant. So let's say you have an existing podcast that's going, but not the listenership isn't quite there. Let's say you've got decent content.
Mhm.
How would you diagnose what's going on? How to do that better?
That's a good question. So the way I would diagnose it the same that I would diagnose like a marketing department. And so what I would do is I would work from the result backwards, and then I would do the result that I want to have and then work backwards from that. Okay? So for example, if I go into my YouTube, let's say I'm only posting this on YouTube, right? Just for the simplicity of the exercise. First, I would look at, okay, how many impressions am I getting? That's the first thing. So let's say I'm getting a decent amount of impressions. Okay, fine. Then the next point is, what is my click through rate? So out of all the people that are looking at my podcast on the search engine, how many of them are clicking on it? Okay, so that's the other part. And then the second part is, okay, so out of the people that clicked on it, what is the average duration of time that they watched my
Mm,
podcast? Okay. So then let's say, for example, you have a lot of impressions, but your click through rate is like under 2%, which is very low. A really good click through rate on YouTube is around 10%. But even if you're somewhere between 2 and 10, it's okay. But let's say you're under that, right? So, okay, you're under that. So your click through rates need some help. And let's say people are only watching the first 2 minutes of your video.
mm.
So then the first thing that I would do is that I would go and see why are people not clicking on my video, because that just making a small adjustment there with the impressions that you have is
Could be
going to start
huge.
getting more people in
Mm.
there. You're right. And how do you fix the click through rate? Well, you would look at the thumbnail. So is the thumbnail not really attractive? Can I change something? Can I add maybe a catchy phrase, right? They used to call it clickbait, right?
Right.
You can sort of clickbait it, but not necessarily. And I'll get into why you don't want to just do something that's like super, super out there to get the click that doesn't match the content. And we can talk about that later. But the thumbnail and the description of the video. So those are the first things that I would focus on, right? After I focus on that, then I would look at the actual beef of my content, and I would say, okay, well, if people are only staying like the first 2 minutes, there's a disconnect there. Maybe I'm not providing them enough value right away. Maybe I'm not hooking the person right away, which is really what people need to work on. Like what you did on this episode, you asked me an interesting question, and then you went into your intro, which you kept it short, and then you got right into the conversation. That's a good flow because that keeps people engaged. You see what I mean? So if you're losing people within that time, I would say I would look at the content, say, what am I maybe just rambling on too long with my introduction? Is my introductory video not good enough? Because you can have an
Mm.
introductory video, but if it's not attractive, people are leaving. So then you work on fixing that part. And then once you fix those things, then you can get into the impressions. So how do I get more impressions? And this is sort of like SEO, where you have under every YouTube video, you have tags, right? All of these tags are essentially the keywords that people would search for on the YouTube search engine. So if you have good tags and you use all of the 500 characters that you're allowed to use, you have the tags, then that's going to help your content be more findable. So now you fix the findability problem, the clickability problem, and then the watch through rate. And that's how if you start making those improvements over time and measuring your results, that's how you grow.
So basically, what you're saying is this part of it is not art. This part is science. Like you need to kind of get down, measure,
That's
tweak,
right.
go, call a friend, just like Rafael, take a look at my thumbnail. It's what do you think? And so, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So, as you do more podcasts, is it better? Like we happen to be doing this one live, so this is what it is. But we could have recorded this and not gone live. Then is it to get the structure right out of the gate, or is it better to just edit the podcast after you've recorded it to really produce it to be something a little bit more powerful? Thoughts on that? Which way would you recommend people go, and what are the pluses and minuses of each way?
It depends. I mean, one of the minuses with doing it live is that it's live, so something goes wrong, it's happening right there and then. But I would say that there is a trend right now on social media where live content is what people are watching right now. Like if you go to TikTok, for example, a lot of people are doing live content and they're growing very quickly using live content, right? So that's always an avenue because people do like the raw, unfiltered
Mm.
side of creation. And that's a trend that's going to continue and increase over time because people are kind of a little bit tired of the overly edited, very
Mm.
professional looking types of videos. And by the way, if anybody's in the marketing advertisement agency, they really need to stop doing that because people know they don't want that anymore. But anyhow, so that's the plus side of doing it live, right? And people can engage with you directly, which is a huge plus. People could be messaging you, commenting, asking questions. So there's that benefit of it. What I would say is just try a combination of both. So like have a live video, you did it live, take the for the post-production side, then edit it and then post it again. That might be a way that you kind of, get a little bit of both.
Have your cake and eat it too.
Exactly.
So tell me about, so there's we're going to have this conversation and there's a possibility, Rafael, you might say something brilliant. It could happen.
It could,
And,
but it could.
and so we get shorts out of what we do together.
Right.
And so what is your strategy for capturing shorts and then how to use them in a way that actually feeds the podcast again, that finds new traffic for your podcast? Any thoughts or strategies on that?
Yeah. So again, this is the science behind the art, right? All of this is achievable in the pre-production stage of the podcasting. What I mean by that is shorts that are going to go viral, that are going to increase the awareness to your podcast, are shorts that have content that is educational or entertaining. And the other part is that it's viral. So it's relative. It's something that people are talking about right now. It doesn't have to be, and when I mean viral, I don't mean viral from the perspective of like it's in the news right now.
Mm.
I mean viral from the perspective of this is what people on these social media platforms, this is the type of content that they're engaging with. Okay, so those types of trends, I would say it's more trends than anything else. And so on the pre-production side, you're gonna make sure that you're gonna position and ask questions that are the types of questions that podcasts similar to yours are asking that's making them go viral. You see what I'm saying?
Right. And that just comes back down to the seriousness of it, that you need some time to do this right.
Correct. Yeah, because again, planning is the key. So you plan out the questions. I'll give you an example. So I had a podcast, well, actually today and yesterday, but yesterday, with a gentleman who does this really cool thing where he does like AI news in under 90 to 60 seconds, and that's his whole thing. But he also has a recruiting company where he helps recruit, people at a
Mm.
very high level of professionals and so on. Um, and I knew that I wanted, because he's in the AI space, I knew that I wanted to ask him about the Elon Musk and Sam Altman court case, because people are talking about that right now.
Mm.
So because I knew that, I found a way to plug that question into the conversation. So when I go back to my post production side, I know that I have that question that I'm gonna clip out, because that's what people are talking about. You see what I mean? So it's all
Brilliant.
about that.
All right. So on our podcast, we were having a problem, and the problem was
Hmm.
this: is one of the things I like about podcasting is that it I do it to learn things,
Right, exactly.
a very selfish reason, and Google is a machine that's designed to answer questions.
Correct.
So podcasts naturally lend itself to SEO.
Yes, 100%.
So we have this conversation. We transcribe the entire conversation, and then basically get ChatGPT to say, okay, take a look at this conversation and turn this into a set of FAQs. What were the
Hmm.
questions and answers done? And then it becomes content for the website as well.
Correct.
Lately, Google's been going back and saying, wait a minute, you used ChatGPT to do this, but we used it with our content, which is our conversation, which was
Right.
not plagiarizing off the internet. It's just like, help us clean this up. Any thoughts on how to do that trick in a way that it's Google friendly?
Yeah, yeah. So actually, that's exactly what we do for, as you know, that's like, our post production service that we do here at Edgehog. So the tip is, the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you're prompting the AI correctly, so that it doesn't go out and scour other information, because you know that the value of this conversation that you and I are having is that it's happening right now. It's original,
Yes.
and it's probably not gonna be. It's really almost impossible to duplicate exactly what we're talking about here.
Mm.
Okay, so with so much AI content being generated, Google is prioritizing original human content. Okay, and this is exactly what we're creating right now. So when you go and you give your transcription to ChatGPT, the first thing you want to ask it is, I want you to create and leverage content based on this specific transcription.
Only
You
do
kind of
not go out and research.
you want to limit it to that,
Yeah.
right? But what you want to do is now, based on this transcription, what are SEO keywords that are low difficulty, low to mid difficulty, and have a good traffic. Why low difficulty and high traffic? Because the difficulty means is how difficult is that keyword,
Mm.
or how competitive is it to rank for that keyword. So you want to find something that's low difficulty but has a moderate traffic, meaning that if you do create content around that, you will be able to get people to see it. So the first thing I do is I ask it to um to organize the transcription based on different topics that are discussed at different stages in the conversation. The next thing is I wanted to pull out the keywords, again, with the limitations that I told you, low difficulty and moderate traffic, to give me different keywords around all of those conversational topics. And once it does that, then I'm going to ask it to start creating SEO optimized articles based on those keywords using the content in the transcription. And now I'm
Nice.
starting to create blog articles. But you can take it a step further and say, okay, but I want you to create an internal linking strategy with these particular articles, so that one person, so if you go to one article, you can find the next one, and the next one, and the next one. It's internal linking. And the other thing I want you to do is I want you to funnel my content in based on intent. So the first blogs that you're generating are more educational in nature, and the lower funnel blogs that I want you to generate are transactional in nature. Meaning, I
Mm.
want an exchange, right? I either want you to go listen to my podcast, or if the podcast is about my service, I want you to go and look into my service, right? And because now imagine you have this like funneling method that's connected through internal linking, bringing people closer and closer down to the bottom, which is where you want them to be, right? But you can take it one step further and you can
Mm,
create a resource from the transcription. So let's say you want to create, if we have a conversation, like for example, right now around podcasting, I'll use the transcription to create like, here are like ten podcasting tips for new businesses, right? Then you have that resource. But what you want to do is you want to use that resource to generate leads. So how do you do that? Well, you will create a lead capture, which you can program, or if you're using HubSpot,
mm.
for example, to host your website, you will put a lead capture on all of the blogs related to the keywords that you already have. So when somebody goes into that blog article, they're gonna get a little pop-up that says, "Hey, there's this really cool resource. Give us your email and your name, and you'll get it." So now you've also created a lead generation strategy that you can automate through email marketing. When somebody gives you the transcript, which somebody gives you their email when they went to your blog article, now you've created a lead. You can nurture that lead, and that can start generating revenue. And if you have the type of product that doesn't require like a lengthy sales process, then you started creating automated revenue for your business because you're having this content that you're creating.
Brilliant. Hey, everyone. As you can tell, Rafael is a master at his craft. And if you've got a podcast and you want to monetize it or grow your business, he's the person to reach out to. Rafael, before we part company, how can people get a hold of you? And is there one last tip you want to share?
Well, if people can get a hold of me, I mean, they can just email me at rafael.flores@edgehogai.com, or they can follow me on LinkedIn, and I can share that link with you as well, Umar. One last tip that I would say is make sure that you're generating video content. Like, if you're not, look, just think about it this way: people that are leveraging AI are already getting ahead, like they're already miles and miles ahead from everybody else. The people that are using it properly, and the people that are using video are already getting ahead of everybody else in terms of content generation. Now, the people that are using both of them are getting to a point in their marketing and their efficiency, and they're building so much leverage that just by trying to write blog articles or by doing a YouTube video every 6 months, you're never going to be able to catch up to the amount of business these people are getting. And I'll give you one really easy example. Like, I have
Mm,
a channel as well. In my TikTok channel, I made a video yesterday, and it's barely growing. Right? I'm just very early with this, but I'm following a lot of the same principles with everything else. I posted a video. I got 800 views in like 1 hour, right? And about like 90 engagements. So you're not gonna get that anywhere else. Like, you are just not gonna get that anywhere else. So it's all about video and it's all about AI. And if you combine those two to help build that leverage, like I mentioned, so leverage meaning you get a very high output with very low input, and that's the way to do it.
brilliant. So, just one last topic since you brought it up. The US government right now is trying to ban TikTok or forcing them to sell.
Hmm.
Thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I have plenty of thoughts on it. Actually, I actually made a couple of videos on it. So the first thing is that the big tech companies are lobbying the government to push this legislation. I mean, we can't even agree. We can't agree on anything, but we unanimously agreed to ban TikTok. That's your first warning sign right there.
Right.
Obviously, it was passed in the House. It's gonna go to Senate, where it's a very slow process there. They didn't express any urgency to getting this passed. So there's obviously the conflict of interest that was lobbied by Google and Facebook, because TikTok is gaining a lot of real estate in that area, especially with them also now moving to long form videos.
Mm,
First part. The second part is that if you look into the legislation, what it does is it allows the president the discretion to eliminate any sort of application that they deem to be a national security risk from specific countries, being Iran, North Korea, China, and Russia. Now, there people, I mean, like the more conspiracy type saying that they're going to use it to like hinder freedom of speech and so on and so forth. I don't think that's going to happen. But the problem is that TikTok doesn't actually have direct ties to China, because the parent company of TikTok is ByteDance. ByteDance has a few people on the board that are Chinese, but the majority of first of all, the company is headquartered in the Cayman Islands.
mm,
TikTok is headquartered in Singapore, neither of which
right.
are China. And there's no actual ownership of the Chinese government of TikTok. That's the other part. And so that whole narrative doesn't really hold suit. And the other thing is that they're saying they want to put it out for sale. They want to put TikTok out for sale again for the same problem, which is again a conflict to the individual, because the people that are, and again, I'm not gonna say this on your show because I don't want you to get in trouble. But anyway, that's the first problem. And the second problem is that TikTok does allow freer content in terms of what people can say.
Yes.
And it's a lot freer. People can express opinions that are not as popular, right? If you see, for example, and I'll give you a really, really easy example, like the conversation between the Israel and Hamas conflict is a lot more open. So you will see content from both sides of the issue where you might not necessarily see in other platforms, right? So that's the other part that people are very upset about, because it's limiting our ability to have a
Real
platform that
conversations.
leverages the conversation that we need to have. Because like it's just these companies that are lobbying the government are limiting our freedom of speech in some ways, and they're trying to change the narrative based on what they believe. The Google Gemini is a really good example of that, with them changing the ethnicity of famous historical figures, because that's what the AI is programmed to do. So like they have a black George Washington, and like these things that don't make sense, but again, it's all part of their DEI initiatives, and that again with lobbying leaps into the government, and that's what we have.
Well, on that note, Rafael, thanks so much for being on the show. I think the best part of the show was the last part, but that's podcasting
That's a good clip for you.
Hang on there. We'll chat once we go off air.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.